I do want to talk really quickly, Jonathan Lemire, though. Here we are, what is it, January the 11th?
13th.
January 13th, lucky number 13. Here we are already in a short year, and you've written a piece for The Atlantic that talks about what Donald Trump has done over the past week or so in the new year. Invade Venezuela.
Okay, check.
Say he was going to take their oil. Threaten Greenland, saying that they're going to get Greenland one way or another, overrun Minneapolis, and kill a young mother, investigate the Fed chair, and something that has drawn bipartisan rebukes. By the way, every one of these things are extraordinarily unpopular, save maybe going in and snatching the dictator from Venezuela. But every one of these things are losers in the poll. Launch that grotesque and misleading website that had one lie after another lie about the thugs on January 6th that beat the hell out of law enforcement officers, the same kind of law enforcement officers suddenly they're interested in protecting after, of course, pardoning these convicts who had been found guilty of beating the hell out of cops by a jury of their peers, told the Times he should have seized voting machines in 2020. Now, I want Democratic officials. I want Democratic lawyers. I want Democratic fundraisers. I want everybody in the Democratic Party to take to heart the old saying, I think Maya Angelou said it, that when somebody tells you who they are, believe them.
Please.
Donald Trump saying 10 months before the 2026 election, which he knows is going to go against him, which he knows may lead to another impeachment, as he has said himself. Now, if the Democrats are smart, they wouldn't do that. But he knows that. But he has said in the New York Times interview, I should have seized the voting machines. Democrats, don't act shocked. Don't act shocked. Get ready.
Yeah.
And be prepared so it can't happen. And then, of course, saying that civil rights advancements for black people who had the shit beaten out of them for drinking out of white water fountains, for trying to not ride in the back of buses, who had German shepherds like sicked on them for walking down the street in Birmingham, had water hoses blasting them against the wall, were unable to go to schools that our parents and grandparents were able to go to. Donald Trump looked at all of that and told the New York Times, yeah, that was bad for white people. It's been quite a week.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure to highlight those two moments from the Times interview about the voting machines and about the civil rights legislation. And I'm glad you just did here as well, Joe, because there was such a flurry of news in recent days. They sort of got lost. But that is where President Trump, that's what he believes, and that's what he's potentially planning again. And you're right. I took a look at this breathtaking start to this year. And Trump, look, he ended 2025, certainly diminished. He felt like a smaller character than he did at the start of the year. And let's be clear, his poll numbers are still very poor. That he is not a popular president right now. Republicans are still deeply worried about the midterms in November. But what we have seen, starting with that Venezuela raid, is pure Trump-id. Not feeling constrained on the foreign policy stage, using military or threatening military intervention. Let's add Iran and Cuba as other places where the U.S. is considering it, or Greenland as well. And here domestically, just doubling down on all of his policies, as unpopular as they may be, trying to sort of seize control of the narrative again, flood the zone, as he has done so often in the past, not talk about things like rising prices or Jeffrey Epstein. The list goes on. This is Willie. This is where President Trump and his White House. Yeah, go ahead,
Jonathan. Hey, John, I'm sorry, and I love Willie's take on this also. They're breaking the law, by the way, every day.
Oh, yeah.
Pam Bondi is breaking the law every day. The DOJ is breaking the law every day. The White House is breaking the law every day. You had the Congress, the United States Congress, pass a law that required them to release all the Epstein files by the end of the year. All of them. What do we have? Maybe 1% out right now? and they were supposed to explain the redactions. None of that has happened. None of that has happened. They are breaking the law. The Justice Department, Pam Bondi, the White House, they're breaking the law every day. And so they're doing all of these other things. We're not talking about the fact that they're breaking the law every day by not doing what they are required under the law in releasing the Epstein files. Instead, we get this mad flurry of things that are happening that, interestingly enough, pull the media and people on Capitol Hill away from talking about how they're violating the law every day because they're still not releasing the Epstein files.
Yeah, it's a great point. I talked to some people close to the president for this piece yesterday who say how relieved they are that no one's talking about Epstein at the moment, at least for now. But that's the other lesson here is that this president thinks Congress is unnecessary and tries to steamroll them every chance he gets, doesn't even consult them or inform them about what happened in Venezuela, for example, defies, he and his DOJ defying Congress and the law when it comes to the Epstein matter. And this is, he's unchecked. That's what they feel like right now. Steve Bannon told me this is a, quote, full flex from this president. Now, there could be restraints coming from the court. Maybe Congress, Republicans will step up. But right now, he thinks if there's something he wants to do, he can simply do it.
And as you say, the administration is thrilled to not be talking about Jeffrey Epstein, a core issue to their supporters. Much rather be talking about Venezuela, Minnesota, or attacks on the Fed chair. And in